Hello and welcome to Sex on Campus. I'm Kenzie Benali and I'll be your host for this debate, discussing various issues raised by sexual harassment at university. Currently, 17% of students report sexual harassment within the first week of university, but shockingly, 66% of students don't actually know of any reporting procedures. So today, we're joined by a group of people looking to bring the issue of sexual harassment on campus to the forefront of your minds and discuss whether or not typical lad culture scene normalises sexual harassment. Now, you're the president of FemSoc.
Yeah.
Could you tell us what you think the term lad culture describes and if you think it normalises sexual harassment?
So I kind of like to think of lad culture as almost like the American frat party culture. It's just a lot of it's usually associated with sports teams, not to kind of generalise in any way, but it basically focuses around the idea that these sorts of groups of guys perpetrate sexist or misogynistic viewpoints and sexual harassment. So I do think that this kind of behaviour does normalise sexual harassment because it kind of goes hand in hand with these kind of sexist and misogynistic beliefs that these groups often have. It kind of acts as a part of that, I think.
So we'll throw that back to you, Ben. So this lad culture, do you not think that that's part of these jokes? Is that not part of lad culture that normalises sexual harassment?
I think lad culture is more often than not used as a stick to beat a certain type of man who's acting outside the social convention of what people deem to be acceptable behaviour in very, very sober terms. And alcohol does make a difference, and certain company does make a bit of a difference as well. And I think people change their views on what's acceptable based on their environments. I think that's normal. So I don't like the idea that we can say, oh, lad culture means misogyny and it means sexism and it means homophobia, and this describes sports team-like people, and then we are going to criticise it and say this should be trained out of people almost. Who the hell is anybody to say we should train something out of you? It's ridiculous.
Okay, say in our workshops, for example, we facilitate them, but in the scenario discussion, we get our facilitators to say as little as possible. They monitor the discussion, they make sure it's going in the right track, they throw in complicating questions. However, what we want is people in the room to disagree, someone to step up and say, I think in this situation you should do this. And the next person that's in their sports team, that's in their social group, to chime in and say, no, I think you're wrong there. I think you should be doing this, which is slightly different, and have that discussion going. So it's not us walking into a room and saying, right, we're better than you because we're part of Good Lad Initiative. We're going to talk down at you for the next hour and tell you what you should do in all these situations. No, we walk in and say, look, these are complex situations. We don't have a singular right answer for them. There's definite positive things that you can do. Let's talk about them.
Now, Ben, you disagree with consent classes, is that right?
I do, yes.
And why is that?
Well, there's no evidence that they work. I mean, obviously everybody wants to reduce incidents of sexual harassment and assault and incidents like that, but even the NUS, who are the biggest supporters of consent classes, they think they should be compulsory at every university for all year groups. Even they admit that there's no actual hard evidence that they work. And I think you send out completely the wrong message when you pull students in their first week of university. They knew their life away from home, where they get to be independent. You pull them in and then you tell them how to behave. I think that sends out the complete wrong message, and actually I think it has adverse effects rather than proactive effects.
Hannah, I'm sure you probably have something to say about that because you have more or less the opposite views on that. You think that consent classes are a really positive thing. Can you tell us about your thoughts?
Yeah, so I think consent classes are a great idea. I don't think they're likely to have an adverse effect. But I think if they're done in a good way and kind of, you know, they're peer-led, they're run by students' unions, and they're kind of done in a way that's constructive, they can be really, really beneficial. I think as long as you're not kind of stood there telling someone they're likely to be a rapist or to perpetrate sexual harassment. I think it can be so helpful because a lot of people don't understand consent or the kind of definitions or the legal side of it. So kind of having that discussion openly at the beginning of your time at university can be really, really beneficial.
But don't you think what you're saying to them is that it's now no longer their responsibility to know how to act, to know the law, because you're saying, don't worry about it, when you get to university, we'll tell you about it. Never mind that most people have had sexual experiences before they arrive at university anyway, so it's probably too late by that point. If you're going to do it, it should be earlier. But the other point is, who are we to say, you know what, your parents probably didn't tell you this, but we know, and we get to tell you. If you think that it's our place to be telling another student that this is how you should behave in the bedroom, then there's something wrong with you.
Ella, now you're a student from Cardiff University and unfortunately you have actually experienced sexual harassment yourself.
Yes, there was an incident in a nightclub. A man who I hadn't been speaking to the whole night literally just came up to me and a group of my friends, put his hand under my skirt and basically tried to finger me. I think talking about it with your friends, sometimes you do need a facilitator to say, okay, like, I'm not going to just, I'm not going to tell you that you're right or wrong, but what you said there was actually edging on illegal, because you keep talking about like, oh, who are we to tell people how to act? But consent classes, can we just bring it back to the fact it's about like the law? And actually I think because consent laws are not publicised, you don't actually know how very specific they are. I think it's a good thing to actually help boys who are going to university who might not know how at risk they are from very specific laws. Like literally there is someone who's been arrested for rape and it's on that's down on his record for life because he didn't use a condom and she gave him permission to have sex with him with a condom.
I think we're talking about two different classes here.
Right.
So you've got the consent class, which I think is vitally important, which establishes what the law says is the law. And you need a discussion about these sort of situations around consent and stuff. And that is a consent class, which I think is very important for people starting at university to have. Because university is often the first time that people have experienced this sort of sexual freedom than what they would have had at the same time at school. However, the next step in this kind of education is the discussion that you're talking about, the moral discussion about what to do in those situations where what sort of person do you want to be and how do you want to feel about yourself. And so that's a second almost class of the first consent class.
So do you think peer education would really work then, Sam?
I think it's changing. People are starting to call their friends out more. When we do workshops, you'll have a group of, say, 15 guys, and you ask them how many people have been in a situation where someone's told a sexist joke. And all 15 of them will say, yeah, I've been in that situation. How many of you disagree or agree that it's a wrong thing telling a sexist joke? They all agree. Then you ask them how many of you have called someone out for it. And you get one or two that will say they have, but most haven't. And you push them on why, and they're just like, oh, I don't want to be the one person that stands out. I don't want to be the person that's going against the flow of the night or whatever. But you start saying that, look, all 15 people in this room agree that it's wrong. Have the confidence to stand up and call people out. Change that social norm. Change that description of lad culture, which is a sexist, misogynistic way, and have a lad culture in a way, which is much more positive. You can still go out and have drinks as guys, but keep your fun to yourselves. Don't unconsciously pull in other people that are going to enhance your night out sort of thing.
We've actually got an audience member who wants to interject. Go ahead and say what you're thinking.
In my opinion, I think it's very easy when you're in a setting like this to say, oh, I don't agree with that. But when you're drunk and you're together with people, I think it's very different. I don't think I would personally say, oh, by the way, what you just did then was quite wrong. I think when you're drunk and you're having a laugh, it's considered a laugh.
Do you not think if you kind of change the attitude? I'm not saying that on a night out you should be that person that goes, you shouldn't turn around to your friends and say, that's wrong, you shouldn't do that. But I think you should change the attitude around it to be able to say if your friend is making jokes that make you feel a bit uncomfortable, I feel like you should be able to turn around and say can we not? Because you can have fun without being right, and you can have fun about your friends making jokes like that. And I do think that yes, you don't need to go around policing what your friends say, but I think, and in this instance, I think it's important that boys kind of be more proactive on it, because if, you know, like, I'll be honest, if I took offence to it, they'd be like, oh yeah, she's a girl, she doesn't like it. But if you start to see that your male friends are a bit like, oh, like, come on, like, it's not the 1950s, like, that's a bit of a lame joke, I think you would see it start to just...
I don't think that's reality. I think it's
a
very easy
It's a very depressing
to say.
view of women, isn't it? That women can't take a joke. It's kind of, it's everything that second wave feminism was about, saying women can do things, women are capable, women should be out in the workplace, women should be able to do everything that men can do. And now we're saying the exact opposite.
I'm not saying
if you
the
say a
exact
joke
opposite.
that a woman doesn't like, then suddenly we have to have a big discussion
It's
about
not
it.
that it's just jokes that women don't like. If you're making a misogynistic joke or a joke about someone being raped, you can't expect someone to not take offence.
There's
If you have a group of
fundamental distinction, though, between a joke and a serious comment, and I think most people are clued up enough to pick up on that.
But do you not think that making jokes about things like that normalises it? Because it really, if you were a survivor of sexual assault, if you heard a joke like that, it would really make you feel incredibly alienated and incredibly depressed. And you have to think that survivors of assault and harassment have already gone through so much, and you're really trivialising their experiences by making jokes about it.
I'm not
That's
saying
why
we
the
should make
offence
people
comes
deliberately feel bad. To be clear, that's not what I'm saying. But what I
No.
am saying is this view that all women in all places at all times can't take jokes because stupid men will pick it up and go, oh, well, he told a joke about rape and everyone laughed. That means rape's good and I'm going to do it. I mean, that's ridiculous.
So Sam, let's bring a question to you. Do you think enough's being done to help male victims?
You don't hear about it as much, and I don't necessarily think the support structures are in there that are equivalent to the female support structures. But obviously this is on the caveat that there's a vast greater amount of male on female sexual harassment and sexual assault perpetrated than there is female on male or even male on male. So the conversation, the main part of the conversation probably does need to address the main part of the problem, which is male on female sexual harassment and sexual assault. However, that conversation about assault and harassment on men does need to happen. You do still need to have these support structures in place, which are the equivalent of the female support structures. I don't believe the conversation happens as much. You hear about underreporting of sexual harassment towards women. There's a greater amount of underreporting in harassment towards men, because men don't feel that they can necessarily talk about these things as openly, as freely, because they'll be judged for coming out with these things. And so I do believe that there does need to be more done in that sort of support structure for men.
In terms of both men and women, awareness as a whole in universities, Em, let's come to you. Do you think enough is being done?
Well, I think that it needs to be more clear how you would report an incident of sexual assault or sexual harassment at university. Like the statistic you gave at the start about how many people experience sexual harassment within the first term. I think that it needs to be a lot clearer where you would go to report those instances and who you would talk to, and also it's important that these students are safe as well, because you don't want a student who feels particularly unsafe by another student because of things they've done to go and talk to someone but don't feel safe talking to them, as if the other individual will know. So yeah, I just think that universities as a whole need to make the reporting aspect and the reporting process a lot easier and a lot clearer, and they also need to have a kind of more published or more public kind of way of saying this is what we do to people who do these things. Like, I know there's been instances of people getting their degrees revoked or getting expelled from university, and I think they need to make these punishments quite clear to kind of divert people from doing things like that.
Ella, do you agree with that statement? Do you think no university is doing enough?
It's hard to kind of say, because at Cardiff University it's quite a mixed bag. So things like, it's like I said, I have no idea if something happened to me, I wouldn't know where to go in the university for support, because our mental health support is probably the place I would think of to go, because there's no kind of, if something like this happens to you, you can come here. And I think reporting it to the police can feel like a very big step for things because a lot of sexual assault is quite normalised. People always ask me when that man attacked you in that nightclub, did you report it? And I didn't, because I didn't even realise that I could. So I think that universities do need to kind of make a space where you can go to them and you can say like, oh, this happened to me, and they can tell you, like they can be there like, well, actually what that person did to you is illegal. You know, would you like us to support you in making a report to the police? Like, would you like someone to go with you to the police station? Like, because that can be like, you know, the idea of going to the police station after something like that has just happened to you must be terrifying. So it'd be quite nice to know that the university kind of has like a little dedicated space where you can go and talk freely about it and they can help you.
I think the only way the universities can be involved is as a referral service. And it might be necessary for them to be a referral service for the reason that you just mentioned. But the thing about reporting it to the police and having a system of courts and judges is that it's guaranteed to be independent. And a university can't guarantee that.
Kind of speaking about reporting to the police, I think it's also important to know that reporting instances of harassment or sexual assault to the police is not an easy thing to do by any means. And there's a tremendous amount of victim blaming in the law at the moment, where the questions asked to women when they've been assaulted are like, what were you wearing? What did you drink? Did you lead him on? Things like that. So women who had been assaulted or harassed might not feel comfortable at all going to the police because they can anticipate things like this. And if you'd been assaulted, if it then goes to court, there's the possibility of then having to be in the same room recounting the events that had happened again in front of people and possibly in front of the same person who did this terrible thing to you. So I think if universities can be there as a support service, I think that that's incredibly influential.
So do you think that universities should be involved, this is for the floor, anyone can jump in, involved in the process of reporting an incident, or should it be a police issue?
I think universities definitely should be involved, especially if it's student on student, because it will have a huge impact on a student's academic potential and their career at university. So the ZELIC guidelines are being reviewed at the moment, because previously you did officially have to have reported to the police to actually have your university take a standpoint on this, and this is now changing. It's obviously not quite how it's been working in universities anyway, but I think it's so important that universities actually do take a stand, because we expect so much from universities for pastoral support anyway. We expect counselling services and mental health support and everything, so it kind of fits very well into that sort of the pastoral side of care that universities should be providing, because they do have a duty of care to their students. So yeah, I think it's really important that universities can actually take a stand on the issue and say, you know, we are zero tolerance, or whatever, however they want to phrase it, especially because it is an issue that hasn't really been spoken about until recently. And universities are now being told that they should be doing work on this. Like the Universities UK Task Force report thing gave very clear guidance on what universities should be doing, and basically said no university is doing enough.
Thank you all so much to everybody who have given their opinions today. It was absolutely fantastic to hear from our contributors, also some of our audience members as well. But that's all we have time for today on Sex on Campus. Thank you everyone for all your valued opinions. We appreciate you coming out today. Thank you.